Hey, Frank, how you doing?
Good, Randy. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. I watch
And
a lot of these podcasts, and like I said, the folks you have on here, I learn something every time. So happy to be a part of it.
oh, awesome. And obviously, being 9/11, just want to acknowledge that. Just awful situation, and then somebody that give their lives for the country, and yeah, just tough situation.
A lot of people sacrificed a lot that day, but they also got to see the power of the country rebuilding and taking it from there. But it's a lot of special folks that day gave their lives.
Exactly. Amen. All right, so getting into it here. So really excited to have a longtime friend, Frank Hauck, on with us. This is episode 181 of Tech Sales Insights, uh, brought to you by Sandler, who's a sales training sponsor of Sales Community. And certainly, Frank, a lot of things are important, but certainly sales training is top of the list, right?
Absolutely. It's part and parcel to a successful organization. You got to keep them fed and you got to give them the insight and the knowledge of what it takes to be successful.
Absolutely. And also, as always, brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, thank you. For those that are not, Tucker will put up a free link that you can get a membership on. And Frank is also on our esteemed group of advisory board members. So, Frank, thanks for that.
Happy to be part of it.
Great. All right. So, by way of introduction, Frank lives in Exeter, New Hampshire, and also Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, where you get the pleasure of seeing Riley once in a while.
I am. Actually, when we were building the house, I saw Chris and Ken Doherty playing through on the member guest. So from the beginning to when we actually closed on the place, good to see some familiar faces.
So great. And Frank's currently retired. For allowed to use the R word, but impressive career. You find out started off at DEC Digital Equipment Corp for 9 years, 21 years at EMC, finishing up as a EVP, president at VCE for 4 years. So really still part of EMC. So if you combine that, 25 years, and then really fantastic job at NCR for another 6 years. And then trying to figure out how we met. We figured out at EMC in 1990. I'd already been there for several years, so must have been there. And your first job there was finance manager in customer service. And I think that's when we first had met each other and first had our first interactions, right?
We did. I was trying to learn on what the company needed to do to make service better. It wasn't the most stellar service organization, and a lot of people had a lot of opinions. And so I was picking people's brains to figure out what do I need to focus on and where do I need to spend some money. And you were the ones that gave me some keen insight.
Excellent. But of course, we never had any problems. We'll get into that in a little bit. But by way of, and certainly Frank, my perspective, consummate professional. I'd say low key in a great way, not the kind of the rah that potentially a lot of us kind of were, but just so professional. You find just really ran so many of the key organizations that really made EMC so successful. So tell me with the introduction, some other folks that know you well. From Dan Campbell, who's now currently Palo Alto with BJ. Frank Hauck is the ultimate leader and customer-facing executive. His sales channels, customer success, and break-fix teams all love him because he leads with humility, empathy, and accountability. No one ever wants to let Frank down. Customers and partners love Frank for the same reasons and because he always shows up for them and advocates for them. Frank once flew 20 hours to see one customer with an issue, then flew 20 hours back home. Frank remembers every employee, every partner, every customer with a meaningful story of how they met and interacted. Lastly, Frank is the ultimate husband, father, son, brother, uncle, and friend. You will be hard-pressed ever to find another individual who has had such a positive impact on the lives of so many, and that so many absolutely love and respect. Pretty impressive.
Wow, Danny. Oh, thank you.
And Billy Scannell, current, very long time EMC and president at Dell now. Frank was the most unassuming, down-to-earth, and authentic leader I've ever worked for. He was the antithesis of a micromanager. He gave you clear direction and set clear expectations and then let you go. The expression running into the fire also comes to mind. one of our customers had an outage, whether we caused the problem or not, Frank would be the first to either call the customer or show up. And he cared so much and was always very accountable. There are so many things I've learned from Frank over the many years we worked together that we try to emulate today. But most of all, he's a friend with a ton of integrity and EQ. So
I learned a lot from Billy as well. And the reason why he's so successful is because he leaves it all in the field. So like I said, it's been mutual admiration. I love working with him, and I learned a lot from him.
Absolutely. And he should write a book on how to survive and thrive, right? All the different regimes, and just continues to crank. So great to see. And from Mike Ruckers, longtime CEO at EMC, during EMC's rapid growth, the company was voted among the top 3 companies worldwide for quality of product and service. Frank was directly responsible for our quality of service. So
wow.
Pretty.
Well, Mike was one of my, you think about role models and coaches and advisors. I couldn't have done the things that I was able to do without Mike's support and his leadership. He's one of these guys. He's sort of the servant leader. He kind of helps you along the way, but he gives you opportunity to find success. I'll never forget the things he was able to do with me. And like I said, I'll thank him for the rest of my life.
Yep, absolutely. Ditto on that. So jumping into the questions. So you were fortunate enough to go to school at Bryant, and then your first job out of school is at DEC Digital Equipment Corporation, right?
I joined as the credit manager for one of the product lines. And then it was a good way of sort of learning from customers. When they didn't pay the bill, you find out what was wrong. And so getting able to jump in and figuring out how to get it resolved so you can actually get paid was sort of a key piece of learning customer empathy and sensitivity. So it was good learning spot. And I was able to sort of take that and sort of grow. My 9 years at DEC was really in financial positions with throughout 495 in Massachusetts, and to the point where I was the plant finance manager in Salem, New Hampshire, before I joined EMC. At that point, I realized, that job was only going to take me so far. I needed to do something different, and I needed to find a company that was growing and investing and sort of being in a very competitive market. And the timing of jumping from there to EMC in 1990 really couldn't have been better. That's when Symmetrics just got off the ground, and I was very fortunate to be part of such a special team.
Awesome. So I don't know how you can do it, but if you can briefly go through your impressive career, because you had so many great jobs with so many great functional and vital areas.
Yeah, I had a couple of coaches and advisors that sort of helped me along the way, Randy. When I started out in customer service, the company was so small at the time, they weren't going to let you do just one thing. So within 3 months, they said, all right, not only are you the finance manager, you own customer relationships, you own training, and you own partners. And so it got me out of my comfort zone to actually learn some non-financial things that allowed me to kind of spread my wings a little bit. At the same time, I was actually able to help out Jack Egan on a couple of things. And Jack brought me over when he ended up running sales for the next several years. And at that point, the company was growing well north of 100% a year. And it was literally just making sure that we could deliver the goods, we can allocate the products where it needed to be. We started to get very profitable business. Symmetrics was just hitting its stride, but making sure that we didn't break anything along the way. When you grow that fast, it's really easy to just kind of satisfy the customer demand, but then drop the ball. And the thing about Jack is I learned is you got to have a balanced scorecard. You got to do everything well. And for the guy who, was the son of the founder, he sweated the details like nobody else. When I got there every morning, I knew that I was going to be inspected across the board for all the things that needed to get done. So he was in the game every single hour of every day. And I just admired the level of commitment and the being in the day of knowing our customers, knowing our sales team, knowing our development teams, keeping all those things going was the key piece of learning how to run a large scale organization. So between Jack Egan and Mike Rutgers, I was able to get coached by the best. And at some point, we started to sell a lot, and we started to sort of break our ability to support the product. I then went back to the service organization and spent the next 5 years really trying to build a fix the customer program to make sure that, when things went bad, we sold the product that when it didn't work, planes didn't fly, banks didn't process checks, GM didn't make cars. So we need to make sure that we had a rapid response vehicle to ensure that we can get people up and running as quickly as possible. And so that level of commitment, as far as making sure that we were rapid to fix things, that we had a good connection to our engineering team, and we had the right tools to be able to take a broken product and get it back up and running as quickly as possible, that was second to none. So I learned a lot about sense of urgency and mission critical operations.
Awesome. And then not quick stint, but VCE and then NCR.
So before VCE, I actually was able to run the sales organization at EMC from 2001 to like 2006, 2007, and then essentially went back and helped out the engineering team and the manufacturing team from like 2008 to 2010. At that point, we did a joint venture with Cisco and VMware called VCE. We were building a converged infrastructure, and we were able to take that business from 0 to 2 billion in revenue in really 4 years with essentially organic growth. And it was really about scaling quickly, but also developing a recipe for building the product, supporting the product, and making sure that we hired salespeople that could actually deliver the message on point every single time. And I'll tell you that for those 4 years, I think I got involved in like 2 or 3 customer situations when the product broke. It was literally bulletproof just based on the disciplines that we had in the manufacturing and engineering process. So it was a really good lesson in how to build it for the long haul, but also how to build it for the right mechanisms to ensure it didn't break. And then after VC, I went back to EMC, did some things there to sort of help out the sales teams. And then when Dell acquired EMC, I stayed on for 2 more years, really trying to help out, ensuring that we had good messages around the world. I think my title was President Markets and Channels. It's essentially helping out the sales teams around the world, whether they be events, customer initiatives, dinners, whatever it was, ensure that, for the Dell customer base that were now new to EMC, the EMC folks wanted to make sure that they were still going to get that white glove treatment when things didn't work according to plan. And I was there to make sure that they had the confidence in both companies moving forward.
Great. Awesome. And then NCR?
So then, Dan Campbell went to NCR a couple of months before I did. I was actually going to retire from Dell. And Dan called me up and said, hey, listen, I'm taking over. I need someone to run the banking group, which is roughly, NCR was about 8 billion at the time. The banking group is about half the company, so about 4 billion of it. And I really didn't know that much about the banking business besides selling into banks in my EMC days. So it sort of forced me to sort of learn the banking business and sort of take a sales team that was, somewhat, let's say, more immature, and just sort of give them some EMC like best practices around sales discipline, processes, forecasting, the element of making sure that, they had the same level of accountability when things went wrong to get it resolved, to make sure that we had happy customers going forward. So I stayed on, I did that for a few years, and I ran the banking group for the last 4. When COVID hit, some of the people left because, they wanted to sort of get back to their regular lives, and they asked me to step up and run the banking business until it was sold a couple of years ago.
Well, awesome. Then just thinking back, I'll echo the comments on Jack. I mean, he's probably the biggest unsung hero. Just always in the weeds of everything. And when I did my international stints in London and Sydney, I mean, he'd always be the first phone call. He'd want the first phone call. He's always there to help. And like you ran several of the functional areas, but definitely a challenging position. Working for his father for sure. But during that time, EMC just totally cranked, and a lot of us owe Jack a lot for sure.
He taught me a lot. I'll tell you. He taught me, when to say no on deals, when to walk from certain situations, when to dig in, and when to leave something alone. So he had really keen insight about good business practice and how to make sure that the right things occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll jump into the questions here, but anybody that is watching along or listening, feel free to post any questions or comments you want. We have Tucker, as always, behind the scenes, and he will pull those forward. So a few different areas here, but one talking about sales best practices. You certainly have had a catbird seat. Any observations, if you look at those that not only make club, but kind of continue to make club, being in our definition, those that are the top performers year in and year out?
Yeah, it's a great question, Randy. I tell you what, I actually did a study when I stepped into the sales role, because what I noticed is that a lot of the same names showed up on the club list every year. So my question was, what are these people doing that other people are not doing? And I asked a lot of questions, a lot of windshield time, driving to customers, trying to pick their brains. And it came down to a couple of different things. But the one thing that kind of jumps out is that they had a standard of excellence that they set for themselves and the people that touched their customer that was second to none. So meaning if there was a sales call, the level of preparation that they went through was outstanding. If there was a briefing, they made sure that everybody was prepared on the briefing. Everybody had a role to play. It didn't matter if I was the president of the organization. On that sales call, I'm working for the sales leader, right? They're not working on the org chart, they're working for me. On the sales call, I'm working for them. And that level of focus and discipline and execution really what separates the good from the great. And when I saw that these folks never let their guard down, if they were successful one year, right, they made sure that they developed their skills on new products, new features, new functionality. They could tell the story, they could be on message, and they were always prepared better than anyone else.
Yep. And I mean, that's something I think, culturally was ingrained with us, which Dick, Jack, Mike, Roger, and others, would kind of lead by example, kind of, but that notion of kind of the leadership working for the sales team kind of seems to get lost these days. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's at that point, you got to be a little humble and figure out that at that point, you're part of the process. Winning's a team sport, right? And a customer, you want them to look at the salesperson as their confidant, their sort of point of contact. We're all the surrounding cast, right? Daily, they're going to interact with the sales team, but we have to be an extension of that salesperson's organization. So at that point, we've got to figure out how to help them be successful. And in order to do that, you got to take a subordinate role for the salesperson on that call.
Yep.
That's what we signed up for.
Yeah. I also have to laugh where, kind of these days, a lot of times leaders or CEOs want to kind of do the, customer calls kind of one-on-one without the sales rep, which is, just crazy. I have a good friend, I won't name names, in DC who had one of the large networking companies, and the CEO said, "Oh no, I'm gonna do it," and the rep knew the CIO of this group extremely well. So the CIO is pissy. Well, how comes my rep's not here? The only reason you're here is because of that. And of course, then the meeting went sideways, and the deal went sideways, and just awful.
Yeah, like I said, our job is to make sure that the rep is the winner at the end of the day, right? It's a team sport. I tell people, leverage all the resources around you. I can't remember who it was, one of the sales kickoffs. Someone said, when you bring a big check to the bank, nobody asks you if you had any help, right? So leverage resources that can help you be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also seen a lot of super successful executives that really started out as, when I call them junior reps or kind of telemarketers. Any kind of examples there and stories?
Yeah, a lot of the folks that I've seen on your podcast here, I've seen Kevin Delane, I've seen Dan Zugeller, I've seen Rich Napolitano, Dave Donatello, guys that were very, early in their career. And I saw a lot of those attributes, right? Of, being accountable, being able to kind of do the things other people aren't willing to do to be successful. And really it's the extra effort. It's about the extra way of making sure that you take care of the customer, and you're out there learning and relearning as technology changes, and always being prepared for whatever happens. A good sales call, you try and choreograph it, but there's always something that comes up, right? You just have to be able to be adaptable when things go one way or the other. And it's the great ones that sort of figure out the pivots left or right that are part of that dance when things go off course a little bit.
Yeah. So for those that are potentially watching that are kind of earlier in career, any nuggets that you would have for them, or observations you would have on some of those top talent folks that you recall that when they were earlier in their career, any other things that you saw them do?
What I saw them do was essentially own everything with the account. And like I said, when I would show up, I'm an extension of their team. But we typically would scope it out beforehand. But a lot of it was about sharing insight about the marketplace. It was about making sure that if other people were using the technology that that particular customer wasn't. It's about bringing those opportunities to them. It's about kind of making education part of the sales call as well. You want to be able to inspire people. You want to be able to kind of share what you're able to do from a partner standpoint, but it's also about giving people insight that they didn't have. It's about making sure that they can open up and think about things that maybe they didn't think about, yesterday, but gives them ways to think about their business in the future. The folks that I would see were able to have those conversations, and quite candidly, it gave the customers confidence in our sales teams that they were the partner of choice, that they actually hooked up with the right organization and really about the right person to who's going to care about their business as much as they do.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the importance of work ethic?
Okay. Like I said, what I love to see is that when someone's successful, that they're still as hungry in year 10 and 15 as they are in year 1. I'll tell you a quick story. So back in one of the EMC worlds, we typically would, at the end of the event, we'd have like a band, play the customer appreciation. Well, this time we had Billy Crystal come on board. Billy was going to do a 2-hour set of comedy. So my job was to introduce Billy Crystal on stage. So I said, hey, Frank, you got to go back, to the green room and welcome him, to Vegas. So I go back there and I'm talking to him, and everything I'm saying, like I see him and I go, hey, Billy. He's like, hi. And I'm talking to him, and everything I'm saying is like lying dead. I'm thinking to myself, what's the matter with me? This guy, I love him as an actor, I love him as a comedian, but I just wasn't connecting. So I go, all right, I got it. I go, Billy, let me give you a big intro on stage. I give him the big intro. He does his thing for 2 hours. So I'm thinking to myself, I got to go backstage and thank him, right? And I go back and I'm thinking to myself, geez, I bombed for the first part of the meeting. What's it going to be like when I go back a second time? I knock on the door. He opens up. He goes, Frank, gives me a big hug. And I realized at the time that I was catching Billy Crystal when he was in his preparation mode before he went on stage. So we talk about, like Brady gets ready to play the big game. The people that care about their performance, Billy Crystal's no different, right? He was in the mindset of, how do I make these next 2 hours unbelievable? But it made me realize that the great ones never get lazy. They're focused on what they do, and they bring their best every single day.
Absolutely. And, I'll stereotype a lot, but, these days it seems, a lot of that really gets lost. And I'd say, from a leadership perspective, if you don't have leaders doing that, then the people that are further down to, individual contributors, and they don't know, what does great look like? What is an A player? So if you don't have your leadership exuding that, you don't know kind of what to do or how to do it, right?
I mean, that's so true. I mean, the way to set the tone for culture in an organization, it starts from the top, right? So if the top guy is willing to put in the extra hours and the preparation, just like the sales manager, right? If they're going to sweat the detail, that kind of forces the sales teams to have that same discipline about preparation and execution. But they all kind of go together.
Yeah, absolutely. And from Jackson Mead, we have sounds like it's about showing up with a perspective. Very true, Jackson. I make an argument. It's even just about showing up. When I first went to HP, figured out one of the big things were we weren't doing as many sales calls as we should. And it might be like 3 or 4. So I said, okay, hey, here's what we're going to do. I and our leadership team, we're all going to do 8 to 10 sales calls a week. We're going to clear the decks on meetings, non-revenue generating meetings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're all going to go there. So if leadership can get out there and show up, then that helps everybody else go out there and show up.
It sets the tone of the whole organization. We're not just the salespeople sell, right? So I actually talked about Dave earlier. Dave was running engineering for many years. He was as good a sales leader as anybody else because he was out there helping the sales teams get things done, offering different perspectives about the product and the capabilities. So like I said, winning is a team sport, and showing up with people that can actually give insight and give the customer different things to think about separates you from everyone else.
Absolutely. When you say Dave Donatelli, I assume, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And then when you would go into your I'll say your new leadership gigs, whether it was at EMC or VCE, kind of NCR, were there any kind of top 1, 2, 3 things that you would always kind of try and do or lean in on?
Yeah, when you're early in your career, you try and focus on the technical skills so that you can actually be good at whether what industry you're working in, or the type of role that if you're a salesperson in technology, it's good to know the technology, know the industry, know the market. In the middle of your career, it's about getting things done, right? Whether it be project management or building an organization, and then the latter part of your career, it's really about leading people, setting policy, developing the culture of an organization. But they're different things. So essentially, being a lifelong education machine is really what allows people to achieve success. It's about, what got you successful at 20 doesn't make you successful at 50. And the ability to sort of stay humble and stay current about what to do and how to lead people and help them sort of advance in their career. Coaching people is invaluable. You typically get as much back from the person as they do from you. But it's sort of part of the way of developing people along the way. And what I've seen is most successful folks do is be able to embrace that. And when you set the tone of, hey, this is what goodness looks like, this is what we sign up for as an organization, it's incredible how fast that permeates the entire organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And then speaking of I'll say that, training and development side, any best practices that you have there?
Yeah, well, I have people. What I used to do, Randy, is have people give their presentation to me, right? Whether they be pitch perfect, but I would try. The customer say, "Hey, tell me what's going on in your company," and 9 times out of 10, I would answer. But a few of the times, I'll let the salesperson answer, and sometimes I was mortified what came out of their mouth, right? So the inspection is making sure that everybody can tell the story as well as you can, but also going out there and listening to what they say to make sure that they got it right, is to ensure that that same level of capability is consistently portrayed throughout everyone that touches your customer base and ensuring that they got it right. I'll tell you another funny story. So I'm actually doing a webcast at NCR, and it's one of these things where they tape it, and they said, Frank, if you flub anything along the way, we got to start from scratch, right? And so I go through.
Hey, by the way, that's why I do these as lives. We used to do them recorded, and then you get the handlers and the comms people. Oh, we got to cut this out, slice that. No, we're going to go live. We can't do anything. We just let it go, and Tucker's able to save some hair.
So I do my 10 minutes, right? And I didn't think I did any ums or flubs. So the guy's walking towards me. I go, was I good? Was I good? He goes, yeah, Frank, you were good. Then he goes, but you didn't come here to be good. You came here to be great. Now give me great. And what I've seen is the folks that want to deliver great are the ones that achieve success year in and year out. They've got that passion for outstanding execution on a consistent basis. Those are the folks that I admire the most because that's hard work.
Yep, absolutely. Got to keep working at it for sure. And just remind us, we have Frank Hauck, amazing resource here, wealth of knowledge and experience. So if anybody wants to chime in with any other comments or questions, please feel free. So another area that you're super passionate about, and I'll say uniquely qualified for just, not that you're not great with leadership or sales or anything else, but, one of the best in the industry is around delivering exceptional customer experience. And the thing that I always loved about you was just kind of your level of, we all were accountable, but you were very accountable.
Yeah, I mean, we sold a product that, like I said, was mission critical. And when things go wrong, there's an event there that takes place. And in order to move the relationship forward, you got to clean up the event, right? And so what I would try to do is make sure I would go out there with the sales team and explain 3 things. What happened, why it happened, what are we doing so it doesn't happen again? And in that, you sort of educate folks about the issue that occurred. You'd apologize for it because people want to know that you care. And then we build a way back so that they can see that, we've done everything we can to prevent it from occurring in the future. But the thing about customer experience is that it's really about expectations, and then ensuring that you get feedback because something typically always goes wrong, right? Sometimes your invoicing is wrong. Sometimes the documentation's wrong. Sometimes they had a bad support call. Sometimes they got bad information. Whatever it is, and you get that feedback, it's having the discipline to go fix it, right? It's getting the functions together, feeding them back that information with a sense of, hey guys, we let our customer down. Here's what we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. And having that same level of commitment cross-functionally to address those deficiencies that people are kind enough to give you feedback on.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to Jackson's theme about showing up, I mean, I always found no matter how bad the proverbial, what hit the fan,
Yeah.
Showing up and actually going there face to face, and they're going to yell at you, scream at you, whatever, but eventually they want to be proven that they made the right decision. So you got to kind of let them vent. You go through your give and take, and however you're going to figure it out. But then, having that go forward plan. And, too often I'd find people would, kind of hide or run away. So, one of the great things, learn from you and Leo and Jack and others, but you kind of just showing up and you're there, and then you're able to figure out a go forward plan versus those that would just go try and hide.
Yeah. And part of it is, sometimes folks are uncomfortable in situations like that, right? They really want to be on the good news side of the equation. And so I try to shoulder the ones where if someone didn't have that comfort level, I would actually try and take that on to a higher degree so that I can be sort of the one that's dealing with the issue, and then let the salesperson kind of clean up the relationship going forward. And then sometimes we did it in a joint way. If they were totally ingrained in the customer and they wanted to be part of that from the foundation moving forward, we kind of did it together. So part of it is reading the room and also trying to figure out, based on the folks that we had on our own team, what's the best way to play it out going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we both will see what our worst war stories were, but I remember with Paul Noble, I went with Steve Walsh, South Shore Hospital, and we walked in and they were signing in people manually because the computer system was down. And we had this big, I was early in my career, we had this big ass conference room table, and it was the board of directors, the hospital, executives, and that was just, the one thing is bad having your business go down, but when you got a hospital thing like that, it's just like that, just kind of stuck with me forever. And you're there, and you got to figure it out, and eventually we figured it out. But any worst story you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in a hotel in New York for 2 weeks. We took somebody down in the middle of it was actually a book publisher, and their business was completely crippled. But we got so many points for essentially getting them out of that mess. Little by little, they were able to get their business back running, and they couldn't do it without us. We were sort of the way forward. And as upset as they were that the problem occurred, they knew that when they experienced something as bad as that, having a partner that was there every step of the way, I don't think we lost a deal for the next 5 years because of that. Yeah. So I think people appreciate when the chips are down, who the people are that bail them out of the mess, even if your product or company caused it, right? And I think, folks are willing to sort of give you, provide a fee. It was, people by definition, make mistakes. Products occasionally break, right? And you have to play those two things as givens. And now, how do you make that as best as you possibly can?
Yeah, absolutely. And from Izar, if we can pull that up, Tucker. Frank was instrumental building a total customer experience culture at EMC from cradle to refresh. Many times, great relationships start when customer is challenged. How do you maintain close relationships? Okay, question. How do you maintain close relationships in a post-COVID era where customers come to the office 2 to 3 days a week and there's so much more remote work? So, Izar, thank you so much. Awesome, great engineering and tech leader in his own right. But
absolutely. No, I remember him very fondly. COVID was a unique situation where there was no playbook on sort of how to move it forward. And quite candidly, we needed to move our business when I was at NCR to remote and even briefings, even customer interactions. But it's really about showing up and having the level of commitment to initiate those calls and to set them up, because people weren't allowed to enter the building. We couldn't be there face to face. But if you're really focused on ensuring that the relationships stay intact, you find a way of getting, from a standpoint of talking to each other on a regular basis. And even to the point of trying to win new customers, by just having that dialogue and providing that insight and them knowing you and kind of what you're all about, from your organization to the things that you're willing to do on behalf of your customer, it was sort of a way forward. Quite honestly, when COVID started to loosen up and people became back to office, I got my team back in there, because what I found is that we had a really good recipe of when people came in to have dinner the night before, meet them kind of face to face, share less business the first night, more personal stuff. I would ask people, hey, what was your first concert? What was your first job? What was your first car? Talk about, the things that you did in high school. And it's amazing when you meet people to a different way, how the next day you're able to get much more interactive and people are willing to share a lot more about their business and ask a lot more questions about what we can do on their behalf. But it's a journey. It's one where you don't start with, let me tell you how great my product is. It's really meeting the people first, knowing them as human beings and as individuals, and then kind of taking it from there, really trying to find out what problems they have, what issues that they've got to go solve, what their priorities are, and then figuring out a way back how you can help them along the way.
Absolutely. And Azar was part of the amazing engineering team, and Moshe and others that, I mean, those guys, they'd be, you can't make it up, right? It's truly 7x24. They left in their vans from Brookline, online with the computers going, and, they were the, first ones in the fire to figure it out and what can you do and how can we do it and everything else. So it's really a cross company cultural, hey, everybody's in here for the customer, supporting the, obviously supporting the sales rep at the end of the day, supporting the customer.
Yeah, Randy, I don't know if I'll ever see harder working people in my life than that Symmetrics development team. They were available around the clock, morning, noon, and night. They did whatever it took. And it actually inspired me to pull out all the stops when I was tired and not ready to move on. I would see what these guys were signing up for. And like I said, it permeated the whole organization.
Yeah, really just amazing. And again, another theme here being, hey, creates, you show up, you fix it, and it's great another sales opportunity, and a great way to keep the, I guess now you call it kind of NRR in the SaaS world, but retain and then grow over time as well. So we're still have a little bit of time here. So if anybody else wants to chime in with any questions or comments, thanks Jackson and thanks Azar. What about if you wanted to pick kind of one or two mentors that you've had? I know you've had a lot. And if there's any other new names you've rattled off a lot, and any kind of specific advice on anything you've received.
So we've actually talked about a couple. So Mike Rutgers was clearly a mentor to me. Like I said, Mike was, he viewed me more as a utility player, and he was able to sort of put me in various situations. Sometimes I was over my skis, and he kind of helped me along the way to the point where I can sort of execute the way he needed me to. But he gave me opportunities that maybe I wasn't ready for, but he, like I said, he coached and mentored me along the way. Jack Egan for his keen business insight. Like you said, maybe one of the smartest guys on the planet when it comes to business. I learned a lot as far as what to do, how to get things done, when to say yes, when to say no, and sort of what things to push on to make an organization achieve success. And then I was lucky, I had Joe Tucci there after Mike, and Joe was one of the ones that sort of allowed me to do various things. He was more of a regular guy, but Joe kind of pointed things out from a coaching standpoint, things I could do better, keen insight about how to do things that I didn't think about before. He had a lot of keen insight from his Wang days about how to navigate through difficult times. And then when EMC, had a couple of years where it was challenging, Joe had some really keen insight about, things to do to make sure that, the company can stabilize itself, pay the bills, and then grow for the future. And that steady hand allowed the company to achieve success over the long haul. But for a couple of years, it was definitely gutting it out when the chips were down.
Absolutely. And what about anything you would give your younger self advice on?
Maybe just the fact that success isn't linear. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to go from one thing to the other. Sometimes there's jobs you have to take that are, lateral movements. There's mistakes that you're going to make. They're typically not fatal mistakes. So maybe I fretted too much over when things didn't go my way. You got to play the long ball, right? You got to figure out how to keep moving forward and sort of how to make sure that you're learning things along the way, that you're trying to find opportunities that you can navigate through from a career standpoint. What I found is that people seldom leave companies because of money. It was really that they got stale. So just trying to find opportunities that allowed me to get out of my comfort zone, maybe do that to an easier degree. Like I said, I had some help from both Mike and from Joe to sort of help me jump into certain roles that maybe I wasn't thinking about for myself, but those guys thought for me on my behalf. And then the last one is just on, sometimes having confidence just opens up doors. I had a story one time. I was actually selling, and I met the guy. He was the CTO at Sony Pictures, and it was one of those days where I had like 9 sales calls. So I catch the guy at a bar, and I said to him, I go, your job's a lot cooler than mine. I'm selling technology. You're making movies. I go, how'd you get started in the movie business? And he told me an interesting story. He says, when I was in college, I liked to make movies. A friend of mine developed a software product that cut the editing time by like 80%. I go, what'd you do with that? He goes, we actually created a product and we sold it. And I said, who'd you sell it to? He said, Pixar. I said, did you go to work there? He goes, I did. I go, did you interview with Steve Jobs? He goes, I did. I said, what was that like? He said, well, after 5 one-hour interviews, when I was completely drained, I'm sitting in a conference room and Jobs walks in and he just stares at me for 25 seconds. He goes, it was an eternity. And finally looks at me and he says, are you the best in the world at what you do? And he goes, Frank, how do I answer that? I'm 22 years old. I could say, yeah, I'm the best in the world at what I do. He's going, who the hell are you? You're 22 years old. Or I say, no, I'm not the best in the world. He says, well, why should I hire you?
Right.
So he goes, I stared Jobs back for 10 seconds. And I said, well, Steve, it looks like we're going to find out. And Jobs said, that's the confidence I'm looking for. You're hired. You start on Monday. By the way, I want your office next to mine.
Nice.
So having confidence when you need it to have it, right, is be ready for those conversations, just to be ready because they're going to come up. There's certain defining moments. Preparation is everything in those situations.
Yeah, so much so. And a little bit more in the weeds when we're prepping for this, we're talking about kind of old school, new school, and kind of lead generation. You've got a kind of refreshing perspective on inside sales and cold calling.
Yeah, so the best lead gen that we have is really around inside sales and having people good old fashioned dialing the phone, right? Getting marketing leads off of either events or good contact lists and just talking to people and, listening to them and finding out what their challenges are. It opens up the most doors for us. Our hit rate was the highest. So when I hear about, the post-COVID world, when it's a lot less formal, a lot less, connections, talking to people face-to-face, phone-to-phone. We had the best results of getting people to sort of open up their business to us when we actually chased them down and we're able to sort of listen to them and find out how we can help them. And they typically gave us good results at the end of the day.
Yeah, so great. And again, not that people are lazy these days, but there's a lot to be said for just muscling through all that for sure.
Exactly.
So then here, I always like to ask if there's a PG Randy story, but I'm going to tell a PG Frank story. So we had one of our club trips, I think it was to St. Thomas, and you were kind enough to bring your father, which I don't think anybody had ever brought a parent, but he was totally fine and worked out awesome. And then we were off golfing or something like that, and we come back in the bar by the pool. Your dad was a big Knicks fan, right? So he's watching the Knicks game with all the New York guys, and I think he knew more people than you knew then.
Randy, 20 years later, I would see people that were at that club trip in St. Thomas, and they'd say, hey, how's your father doing? I'm like, I didn't even know you knew him. Oh, yeah, we watched the Knicks game together. They were in the playoffs in the early 90s. And it was one of those things where I thought I was feeling bad leaving him alone. I'm like, geez, I wish I was with him all afternoon. He and the New York guys had a blast.
Yeah. And here we go. Eric Mann, you mentioned before, says, great story, Frank. I had Frank on so many of my customer service calls when they needed to hear someone other than me who cared as much about their business as I did. And I don't remember if it was in the prep or on the podcast, you mentioned also DTC, I think, specifically with Eric.
That was Eric's account. Yeah, we went down there a number of times, and it was a really challenging account. Eric took amazing care of them. The relationships he had with the people there got us out of a lot of jams. I remember jumping on a helicopter with Jack one time, flying down and going face-to-face with the depository trust folks. And we were able to save the business. But it was one of those touch and goes where we had a hiccup. They were concerned. We had a room full of folks, but I think we kept it together. But Eric, like I said, he was the leader on that call. We were there to support him. It's not easy to kind of direct Jack to what to do, but Eric did a nice job of sort of playing quarterback that day, and we each played our position.
Absolutely. Yeah. Eric, another great leader. And thanks for chiming in on that, Eric. So anyway, so I'll let you, if there's any PG Randy story you want to tell.
Well, I don't know if you remember this when Frank Keeney had a meeting in Fort Lauderdale, Randy. You remember we all went on a boat. We found
Hey,
this
you gotta
guy's
keep
named
PG,
Crazy
just to be
Greg.
clear.
Yeah, the PG story is this guy let us drive his boat 80 miles an hour off the Fort Lauderdale coast. And he was letting everybody, you try it, you try it. I, I thought we were going to hit a wave and they were going to need a whole new sales organization at the end of the day. But we were able to get back safely. But it was a fun time because Keeney built a top-notch sales organization, work hard, play hard, a lot of fun, but achieving results at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And my PG memory I can share with that. Rich Dyke and I were both commenting about each other's stomachs. And at the end of the day, we figured we couldn't believe how large the other person's was and where it was. And then we got other folks around and we basically realized they're both the same and we were both horrified. So anyway, and then from Aaron Mountain, who's been kind enough to help a bit. Love these stories, Frank. Completely agree. There's a human element in art when it comes to prospecting and sales in general. Given we now live in an AI world, what's your stance on the role of technology in sales?
So it's funny. So one of the things I was fortunate to do is I actually gave back to my college. We're building a sales lab. I actually see it Saturday for the first time. And the tools they have in there are sort of media tools. So it would be like a salesperson going through their pitch and, they get real-time feedback about how they come across. But there's also great AI tools to figure out how it's being perceived. So I think this AI thing is going to change a lot of the level of preparation that people go through. You can actually refine things. You can figure out what's effective, what's not effective, how you come across. And I think the door is just getting open on the capability of a lot of these tools. So I guess my advice is to figure out which tools are available, have an open eye on which things are coming to market, and then leveraging it across the board for your sales organization to continue to ensure that they can be on message, they've got the proper level of dialogue, but also that it's effectively being received by the customer at the end of the day. And like I said, I think the world is just getting opened up to how we can learn more for leveraging these tools for a better sales call across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron's actually with Gong, and some of the cool functionality there is not just basic call recording, but being able to get feedback on specific situations. So if you're a Dell and you want to say, okay, I'm competing against peer as an example in these situations, why do we win? Why do we lose? What are gaps in what the sales reps are doing on the call? So this is all kind of leveraged through AI. So not only can other people within the company just not only hear the call, but then actually the rep being able to get feedback. And one of the cool features I love, because typically recap letters are late, they're awful, they don't even represent what the call had, actually gives you a kind of first draft of a recap note, which you still got to tweak, but just kind of recapping what happened and what the next steps are, which is really cool. So, all this is for sure going to take off. So thanks for that, Aaron.
Yeah, and one thing I found is that sometimes I give people feedback post sales call, and they're shocked. They have no idea how they come across. The level of self-awareness is very limited. So if during the AI preparation, you can actually ferret a lot of these things out.
Yeah.
So you can actually polish off some of those issues before the call itself. The likelihood of success goes up tenfold.
Absolutely. I mean, giving and getting feedback, I'm a lot of times broken record, but if I go on calls with somebody, I'd say, do you have any feedback for me? Eventually the teams would figure out I would want feedback, and then I would take the chance to say, well, can I give you some feedback, right? So, having that getting feedback culture, which again, these days at a lot of companies just seems to be gone, but it's something that just, so vital as you've seen over the years.
Yeah. I was on a call one time and we had a customer say to me that, hey, our system engineer was great. He goes, he's really hard to work with, but the guy is really insightful. So we left the call and I said to the sales rep, I go, what are your plans tonight? She said, I was going to take you to dinner. I go, no, take the SE to dinner and feedback what the customer said.
Right.
I saw her the next day. I said, how'd it go? She goes, he was completely shocked. Like no one had ever told him.
Right.
So sometimes, and I didn't want to do it with me there, right? So the person would be ultra defensive. But at the end of the day, sometimes we all have spots that we can't see, and having somebody point it out to you kind of goes a long way.
Yep, absolutely, for sure. So, and then Eric chimed in. I guess DTCC was Joe
Reale. Oh yeah, Eric had a phenomenal relationship with him. Yeah.
There you go. Awesome. Well, you've been amazing as expected. Really appreciate it, Frank. Just so much wisdom, so many great insights here. Thanks for what you've done for the industry, and certainly any companies and teams would be very fortunate to get any of your advice, feedback, and mentorship as well.
I appreciate that, Randy. Like I said, I've been very fortunate. I see the folks that were early in their careers, and I've seen them progress to senior positions across the board in the industry. Quite candidly, it makes me proud that I was sort of part of their journey, because I saw them kind of as young bucks and turn into some real superstars, in high technology. So I've been really fortunate to be able to touch a lot of these folks along the way. And like I said, it was a lot of fun, a lot of great times, but also I learned a lot from them as well.
Absolutely. And coming up next week, we have Scott Harvey, who's a CRO of Sprinkler. And then following weeks after that, executives from Cynics. Actually, we have Scott McNeely, Denise Millard is channel chief at Dell, Matt Horner, WWT, Eric Mann, actually, speaking of which, November 12th, Dave Donatelli coming up, who you mentioned, and lots of great others. So Tucker, thanks for your help behind the scenes. Sandler, thanks for being the sales training sponsor of Sales Community. And Frank, you're awesome. Everybody have a great rest of week. And by the way, I'm in, where am I here? I'm in Washington, Pennsylvania for my son Tommy's Quebec City Capitales playing the Washington Wild Things in the championship. So we'll see how they do tonight.